Welcome to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone Radio Show. My name is Leon Jones. Tonight's topic, I'm going to continue the Black History Month series. This time, I'm going to talk about something that you don't hear too many people on YouTube talking about. And I'm going to talk about white classism versus white supremacy. Now, you could say this is an extension of the definition of racism video that I did a couple days ago. What we're always told in history when it comes to any type of oppression, we always utilize black people. That is true. But let's break it down a little further. Because if it were just black people who have suffered oppression, then why do we have more white people on welfare? I'm going to give you that answer right now. White people are used to having the majority of the power and resources. Let me go back and reverse that. White people are used to having all of the power and resources. Is that really true? No, that's not true. The elite white people. See, when we talk about classism, white folk, although we don't live in a caste system in the United States like they have in India, white people have always utilized class as success. And if that weren't true, if you look at some of the states who voted for Donald Trump, they were red states. Kentucky, and Kentucky is very, very poor. Tennessee has a decent income, but for the most part, they're also a poor state. But why did these white people vote Republican? Even though a number of white people in those states, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, they're on food stamps as well. Well, they voted for Donald Trump, or they vote for the Republican Party based on this principle that they believe in traditional values of family. Although you have people in those states that I just mentioned, talk about Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, they basically live up in the mountains. They're very, very, very poor. They stick together. Now, regarding white classism, when we talk about prejudiceness, well, white people who have the money don't like white people who don't have money. This is why you have white families who are pretty much split up if you are a poor member of a certain family, because the elite whites stick with other elitists because they believe that if you are elite, you hold all of the power. Now let's go to black people. Believe it or not, there are also black people who are elite as well. You look at people like Michael Jordan. He has not come into the black community to do anything for black people except sell his Jordans, which black people somehow will spend $350. Oprah, she's elite. Now, she has done for black people in Africa, but she hasn't done for black people here, not that I know of. But when you take the term white classism versus white supremacy, you got opposite sides of the coin that equal the same thing. The reason why I call it white supremacy is because the majority of the elites who have the power are white men. J.P. Morgan, Milton Hershey, then you have others. Now, some of these individuals are deceased, but nevertheless, their legacy has been passed on, and their companies continue to make millions and millions of dollars. That being said, if you look at where your illiterate whites live, for the most part, they live in trailer parks. And where do your illiterate blacks live? For the most part, they live in the projects. Well, if you look at the projects and you look at the trailer park, again, you got one of the same. You got welfare, out of wedlock pregnancies on the white side of the tracks, and you got the same thing on the black side of the tracks. So when you tie this issue together, is that really racism? Although black people have been exposed to racism, but why? Because it was the elite who told black people that they were black. Why did they tell them that they were black? They told them they were black so they can control them. This is why black people utilize white Christianity. But going to the other side of the house, the poor white people, they're also utilizing white Christianity. Why? Because religion is used by the superior class, which is generally majority white men who are your elitists. The way they control the masses is through indoctrination, utilizing the education system, the church, gentrification. And what do I mean by gentrification? Gentrification is when you basically take an area that was occupied by the poor, whether whites or blacks, and then for some ungodly reason, you get a developer that comes up with some money and they want to buy the areas where the poor people live. So what do they do with the poor people? Well, they move them out, move them away from the city. And what happens to the areas that these poor people live? They become abandoned. Then they're razed, R-A-Z-E-D, and here's a developer with money. He buys a property. Then that developer builds new infrastructure, and it could be an interstate highway, a shopping center, hotels. It could be any type of infrastructure. However, the newer infrastructure is going to have a cost. And at the end of the day, the rent's going to be so high that the poor people can't afford it. Well, that's what gentrification is. It's replacing the poor with rich people. And if you look at the cities, it's exactly what you got. That's why you have a poor section and you have a rich section. And you have poor whites who live in the city as well. The only difference between the poor whites and the poor blacks is the poor whites keep their section of the city clean. And the poor whites have more pride in who they are. Even though, again, the white elites do not like them as well. See, when you are in a particular class, i.e. lobbyist groups, government, CEOs, anybody with the money, and that's what everybody must understand. See, racism was always controlled, along with classism, by the elites. They had all the power. So the question is, why did whites have a hard time with blacks? See, the whites who were part of the Ku Klux Klan were your lower class whites. But guess how that happened? Well, they were given the orders from the elite whites. That's right. See, the low class whites were put in the field by the masters who had the money during slavery, so the poor whites and the blacks, because the poor whites were also slaves as well, and the poor blacks, well, they decided to split them up and utilize the poor whites as the field supervisors. What that did, that gave the poor whites a little bit more ego because they were utilizing that benefit of being white. But you have to look at it. the masters didn't like them either. Believe it or not as well, there were whites also hanged during the Ku Klux Klan time. See, a lot of us believe that the Ku Klux Klan just tortured blacks. Well, there were white women who were tortured for interacting with black men as well. But that's a different video. What I'm trying to get to everybody is today's world, when we talk about racism, you have to include classism. Because with white people, it is about class. If you look at areas in any big cities, particularly your downtown section, Manhattan, there are the areas that have all the fancy stores, the hotels. They have the best transportation because who put up the money for this infrastructure? Your white elites. Your elites also own all of the media. So they decide what you're going to hear and what you're not going to hear. They also run the colleges, all of your elites. Now, the elites are the ones who have all the power. So therefore, if you are white, you might not want to be put in the same category as blacks, but you're just as oppressed. See, everybody who's a worker is a slave because we get a wage. And what happens with a wage, the reason why individuals are much poorer today, it's because the wealthy in this country are getting rich. And you want to know how the wealthy gets rich? Look at the stock market. How many times in George Bush era and in the past did you see the stock market finish over 16,000? Well, when you have stocks finishing that high, that means the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Because at the end of the day, the reason why you have two classes of people, rich and poor, it's because the worker bees, who are basically the working poor, because there is no more middle class, because the mills or your manufacturing, that was already outsourced by the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement that President Bill Clinton signed in the 90s. That shipped all those jobs overseas because it was cheaper to make products overseas and you could get cheaper labor. Here in America, you only have the service industry. The service industry does not make a lot of money. So you have two types of workers. You have your skilled workers and your unskilled workers. When President Obama was in power, the jobs that were basically created to make the unemployment numbers look good were part-time jobs. Now, those part-time jobs were unskilled jobs. Being that they were unskilled, there was not enough money for anybody. I don't care if you had a college degree or no college degree. You couldn't live off $7.25. You can't even live off $15 an hour. And that's the minimum wage that the liberals want. That might not happen. Because if you raise the minimum wage, what's going to happen? You have to raise the price of goods. And when you raise the price of goods, you're going to lose customers, particularly at McDonald's or those other jobs that require no skill. But back on the topic. When you look at the powerful in this country, and of course, let's go to the black side now. The powerful in this country are your entertainers and your athletes and your television personalities. Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey. They're the big kahunas who make the money for black people. You also have Kathy Hughes. She's the owner of TV One, which that is a watered-down version of black entertainment television. You have Magic Johnson. You have Steve Harvey. and a lot of other black figures. But let's break down the black figures and the white figures. Although both elite, there is one difference though. You see, with all of the black elite, with the exception of Magic Johnson, Oprah, and Michael Jordan, and there may be a few others sprinkled in there, most of your black elites are owned by white elites. That means the Steve Harvey Show, that's owned by somebody. Let me put Oprah in there. Oprah also owns something as well. She owns the OWN network. That is her network. However, let's talk about that for a moment there. Who sponsors Oprah? The white elites. Because if you look at all the commercials that come on Oprah's channel, you don't see any black commercials. They're all white commercials. So even though she has the power, she has more power than your average black person because of her money. She's also being funded by the white elites. So in essence, when you have white oppression is affecting both blacks and whites. But we as blacks know white oppression as racism. If you're white, it's known as classism. If you look at both issues, it's really one issue. One equals the other, but the language or the vernacular is different. Because, again, as a worker, and it's much easier to have workers because the workers pay most of the taxes. Whereas your elite, yes, they pay taxes, but once they get above $176 million, as you know, we have a progressive tax system, they can take a lower tax rate. That's why Donald Trump takes a lower tax rate of 15%. Mitch Romney, they take a lower tax rate of 15%. It is the workers, I call them the worker bees, or the poor people, who subsidize everybody. They subsidize the corporations, and they subsidize the poor people who are on welfare. Why? Again, it is the white elitists and some black elitists in this country, but it's basically your white elitists who have established an underground class system that keeps all of us poor. Even if you have education, the value of an education is like the value of a dollar. It's not as high as it used to be. Because if you have everybody going to college, there are not enough jobs for degree people. So what happens? You got a degree and you're broke. And see what elitism does, it creates bad credit for everybody. Because what's happening is the cost of tuition shoots up for college. The cost of goods and services shoot up for everybody. This is why the worker bees, who are under the guise of, if you're black, white supremacy, and if you're white classism, we continue to be oppressed. And also, with the lack of education, your worker bees are too busy working and or they really don't know the rules of the real world. This is why it's difficult to get ahead. Because when you're constantly working for a wage, again, if you're white, you're working in a class system. Because white folk, believe it or not, if you're an elitist, they don't care about you if you're a worker bee. And this is what some white folk don't understand. They actually think individuals who are white, just like you, making money, they're your best friends. Oh, they hate you just like they hate black people. In fact, they don't even want you near them. even if you're a family member. Now, at least with blacks, we'll take some of our bum family members because we're benevolent people. A number of white folks aren't benevolent people. When it comes to their money, they're for their money. And the ones who have the money, they're not as religious. See, religion gives poor people hope. It doesn't really change the situation any. Because at the bottom of any line, it's about money. And that's what elitism is. See, when you have more worker bees, that's more taxes. Well, who gets all the taxes? The elites. Again, your politicians, your lobbyist group, your media professionals. And these are positions that aren't producing anything. But they make all the rules on how they can take your money. So the next time somebody talks to you about white supremacy, you also tell them that there's white classism. Because when you look at the end result, there are white poor people and there are black poor people. There are white elites and there are some black elites, and they're only elite because, for the most part, black people aren't used to having anything. So if you look at a football player who's making $4 million, we think that's rich. But you have to understand that football player or that baseball player, what is the owner making? That's the trick. You have to understand the design of white classism and, of course, white supremacy to understand what's going on and what I'm presenting in this video. Because the reason why we are poor is we do have institutional racism, but we also have classism for white people. Although we act differently about the issues, they're one and the same. Poor is poor, no matter what. Because I see white people out there struggling just as hard as black people, and they're not getting ahead any more than we are. This is why, particularly, there are more white people. More of them make up the welfare system. However, when it comes to the densely populated areas, more blacks and Hispanics make up the welfare system. And you have to realize that per capita of the population, although black people are 13% of the country and Hispanics are around 25%, when you live in a big city, you have a lot of social welfare programs in the bigger cities. And who is on those programs? Blacks and Latinas. But see, when it comes to the elitists, who's complaining about politics? Who's complaining about Hillary losing? It's the worker bees. You see, no matter who's president, when you are in the elite status, it doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative. You have the money, you're unaffected. In fact, you can make the rules because you can buy somebody off. And that's the difference between elite and poor. Because when you look at the United States of America, that's exactly what you have. And if you don't believe me, go out, look at everything for yourself. You see, the elite, they don't work payday to payday. They can work paycheck to paycheck. Well, even they don't do that. They pay people who work paycheck to paycheck. But see, the elite, who make all the rules, again, they're your politicians, they're your CEOs, they're your ball players, your entertainers, They may not be speaking behind a microphone with a podium, but they have influence. Because, let's be clear, let's be crystal clear. The ones who have the gold make all the rules. That's the golden rule. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show for this evening, Friday, February 10th, 2016. Correction, February 10th, 2017. You can tune in to the 401 Talk Zone radio show every Monday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Blog Talk Radio. Guest calling number is 215-383-5785. Now, if you like my videos, please share and subscribe to the 401 Talk Zone radio show so I can continue to give you quality information for educational purposes from a professional and mature perspective. Now, on this channel, I don't participate in drama, debates, controversial or emotional issues, nor do I participate in drama or unnecessary bickering. This channel is for educational purposes, and I educate individuals on business, education, careers, and have political news. Now, if I use a social topic, it's for educational purposes, like tonight's topic. And the reason why I do it, I want to give you the tools to survive under this elitist type of system. So I keep everything realistic but positive, because knowledge is power. If you have a business or a topic that you would like for me to discuss on Blog Talk Radio or YouTube, just email me at lej6521@gmail.com. And I'd like to give a shout out to a couple YouTubers of mine, The Real Deal from Gary, Indiana, Reg the Bad Guy, Big Body Matt Cole. Check out his channel, Big Body Trucking, and Q Wilson. He's going to talk to everybody about how Uber works. If you have a comment, please leave it in the comment section under the video. But make sure that your comments are pithy. No bloviating, pettifogging, or filibustering if you wish to opine. That's it for this video. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. Remember, please be gentle and respectful to each other, and have a wonderful and blessed night. Good night.